Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swing and a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Matt Moreno, and we are talking Dodgers injuries. Some of these injuries starting to pile up, specifically on the side of the pitching staff. So, Matt, let's get some updates here. Let's start with the biggest name on this list, and that's Clayton Kershaw. We did get a bit of an update over the last few days, but not necessarily the update that many of us were hoping for.
Yeah, so obviously, Kershaw's IL stint sort of came out of nowhere and started, the morning of his scheduled start, they announced that he was put on the IL with SI joint trouble, which has been described as a bunch of different things. Basically, it can affect like your lower back and kind of creep into your legs. But at least with Kershaw, it seems pretty local to, or pretty focused primarily in his lower back area, which is related, not necessarily related, but he has had a history of back trouble in the past. He said at the time that he anticipated making a quick recovery. I was a little skeptical. I thought that was more just, wanting that to be the case. And it's certainly understandable that he would express that sentiment. He received an epidural shot, and unfortunately, the 2-3 days after didn't really bring much relief. And so when the Dodgers went on started their road trip that they're currently on, he didn't travel with them, but he instead went home to Texas, which I thought was a little interesting. It's not clear. Kershaw had been throwing while he was still at Dodger Stadium. It's not clear. Dave Roberts hasn't said one way or the other if he's continued to do that at home in Dallas. Even if he does, I don't know if he were to stop throwing, I don't know if 1 week would necessarily affect his timeline too. But, he should rejoin the team in Arizona, and then maybe, we'll get more updates then.
Yeah, it does feel like, going home to Texas makes it feel like we're a couple weeks away from maybe there even being any positive updates of him throwing again or him, working bullpens. And at that point, he's going to have been out long enough that does he need a rehab start? Does he need to, go down to Rancho Cucamonga and throw 3 or 4 innings just to get things headed in the right direction? But from your sense, would you guess, is this precautionary, or is this something that Dodger fans should be worried about sort of impacting this year to a great degree?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think there's reason to worry just because it's your back, and Kershaw can and has done everything he could to sort of strengthen the area and get a good workout and all that. But if you just make one wrong move, or in this case, Dave Roberts said it seems like it was just something that happened when they were flying back from Pittsburgh on the plane.
Yeah, you
hurt your back, and then you're kind of beholden to it recovering at its own pace. Yes, maybe an epidural can kind of help. In this case, it didn't provide the same relief as it has in the past, and kind of to your point, one thing that I forgot to mention is Dave Roberts did acknowledge that we are probably, at least 1 or 2 weeks away from Kershaw potentially throwing a bullpen session again. And like you said, the longer the period is where he's not able to get off a mound, then the more time he'll be on the IL.
Yeah. Well, speaking of unclear timelines and bad news for Dodgers pitchers, important Dodger pitchers, Blake Treinen transferred to the 60-day injured list. What's the latest on Treinen and his status?
Yeah, so his injury is interesting because he hasn't said what it is. The Dodgers have basically called it inflammation. Although when Dave Roberts was kind of pressed for details, I know we kind of joked about it on one of our other videos. He had updated news on Tommy Kahnle and have the MRI results on Blake Treinen, and we both agreed that's probably not likely, and he's presumably just doesn't want to necessarily disclose it. And then in Blake Treinen's kind of first and only time discussing the injury, he told us that it's just more about conviction and being able to, and he's not necessarily dealing with pain right now. When asked if there's a structural issue, he said if that was he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he just said if that were the case, he wouldn't be planning to come back this season, which is still the plan. And, he obviously signed to the contract extension to guarantee his deal through next year, but there still isn't much known and about, his injury. And there is, I think, a possibility that the Dodgers are preparing for that he doesn't pitch again this year. At minimum, he's definitely going to be a long-term absence. I probably wouldn't expect him back until September.
Yeah. Daniel and I we talked about on Monday's show, what do you make of the extension? And Daniel's point, which was one I hadn't thought of, was would they really give this guy an extension if they knew he was going to be out for the entirety of the year and it was more severe? The flip side is, as soon as I heard that he was getting an extension, it was like, oh, he must be done for the year. That's why they've locked him up beyond this year. So interesting there. And I mean, obviously impacting the bullpen and the starting rotation. not talking about a Hall of Fame case or any of that, but which of those two guys from a roster perspective are you more concerned about? Is it the hole at the back of the bullpen now, or is it the hole in the rotation?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I think I'll have to go with rotation just because I feel like the depth isn't there. Whereas, as much as Blake Treinen has a very unique role on the team that is hard to, sort of replace, the Dodgers at least do have options if they need to go to kind of a more traditional, okay, you're like our 6th and 7th inning guy, you're our setup. Obviously, the closer is still set with Craig Kimbrell. So I think because of that, I starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean, as good as Tony Gonsolin has been, the fact that Andrew Heaney, another guy we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes, is still out. Tyler Anderson has been great, but you're still there's a hole in that number 5 position, whereas, Daniel and I talked, there's still 5 guys at the back of the bullpen that you feel really good about. Vesia, Gratterall, Phillips, I would throw into that category, and then you've got Hudson and Kimbrell sort of in traditional setup and closer roles, and so although I would say that, like, if you were ranking the best relief pitchers in all of baseball, Blake Treinen's probably higher on that list than Clayton Kershaw is on the best starting pitchers in all of baseball. I think for this team and the way it's built, I agree with you. Okay, a couple more names. Tommy Kahnle, another relief pitcher, placed on the 15-day IL. Forearm injury for a guy coming off of what he just came off of. Sounds concerning to me. Should we be concerned about Tommy Kahnle on the injured list?
Yeah, this one was interesting because when you heard that he's having forearm issues and obviously coming off Tommy John surgery, I think a lot of us sort of assumed, the worst possible scenario. So on one hand, it wasn't that. They're saying, the MRI showed that it's a bruise kind of related to his injury and surgery. So I guess you could take some relief there, but then also like a bone bruise, that's something that can linger and obviously be painful. And he may not necessarily fully recover from it this year. He might have to maybe pitch through some discomfort. And so you kind of would worry about that. But, at least for now, it seems like he will be back at some point this season.
Okay. And Andrew Heaney, last one. Starting pitcher, started out unbelievably. Sounds like we have a little bit of good news. If you want to, we're going to end on we decided we'd end with Heaney because there's a little bit of optimism here. What's the latest on Heaney?
Yeah, definitely. So he threw a second bullpen session since being put on the IL, and he obviously went multiple weeks without being able to throw off a mound. So the fact that he's now been able to do it twice without really suffering any sort of setbacks is encouraging. He'll have to throw, live BP some batters face some batters at some point soon. And then after that will be a rehab assignment, and then, he should be ready to get activated. So it is positive news, but all of that being said, he still also is probably like 2 or 3 weeks away.
Yeah. Well, at least we have something to look forward to. At least there's some form of a timetable. And like you said, I agree. The second bullpen is huge. The first bullpen, it's like, great. Now let's see how your body reacts. Let's see how the arm, the shoulder react. The fact that he was able to go back out there, hopefully we hear progression in the next, maybe again, a rehab start, that kind of a thing, which would be huge because that he would fill the number 5 role in the Dodgers rotation. And as we said, if the bullpen is a little bit in flux, having 5 guys that can give you a little bit of length that you can feel good about not having to pull in the second or third inning all the time would be huge for the Dodgers. So there you go. Kershaw, Kahnle, Treinen, Heaney, some updates there for the Dodgers. And I would say on the whole, by the way, that the Dodgers have been pretty fortunate. I know we're talking about 4 arms here, and that feels like cluster. That feels like, oh my goodness. But I would say by and large, the offense has remained really healthy. So you hate to lose Treinen. You hate to lose Kershaw for any period of time. But this is baseball. And shortened spring, we knew that this was going to happen, that pitchers were probably going to be more impacted than hitters, and we're starting to see the results of it. So we appreciate you watching. We appreciate you checking us out. That's Matt Moreno. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As always, DodgerBlue.com has all the latest on injury updates and stuff like that, so make sure to check that out. We'll see you next time.